Hi, I'm Patrick Palm, CEO and founder of Favro, and this is the Learn from Leaders podcast. The background to these interviews is that Favro clients are some of the most innovative and agile businesses out there. And it's used for collaborative planning by marketing teams, by product teams, HR, management teams. And what this means is that we get to know some truly inspiring people. So what we do in this podcast is that I invite them here for a conversation about something where they are true leaders, so we can all learn from it. Let's go. I had the privilege to get to know you, Mark, but we actually known each other for quite a long time, because you were actually one of the first users of Favro and used it in very different kind of situations, all the way from recently organizing a film festival to digitalization of a very traditional workplace, and you have a big background in game development, which is one of our big customer groups. So why don't we jump straight into just a little bit on your background, because just kind of quickly looking at your resume, it's kind of like wow, this guy's been doing a bit of everything, and how did this happen?
Right. Well, Patrick, the main thing, we talked the other day, and I've been thinking about this in terms of, leading creatives, and what kept drawing me back to that, role. And I find myself in throughout my whole career. I started out as an architect. That's what I was trained as an architect in the 80s. And I've always been passionate about creating, and the creative process in particular, and how innovation and tech can play in that process and how it impacts that process. So being trained as an architect back in the 80s, we had the firm that I was working with doing my internship, we had a CAD system, and that was like, this is fancy 2D, you could draw with a computer. I mean, that was big in the 80s, but it grabbed me, and I started managing that, and we actually started developing. 1990 was a huge year, because for me, at least in my career path, because the Mac 2FX was released, and that was actually the first Macintosh that would actually do 3D. And we were really pushing the tech at that time with a little company out of California called Electric Image Animation System, which was a 3D rendering system that worked on the 2FX. Started doing a lot of things with 3D visualization. This is in 89, 90, 91. That wasn't really done that much. It's now commonplace. But that really got me involved in looking at the creative process and how technology impacts that, and the importance of tools. Back then we didn't have cloud-based tools or anything like that. Having Excel running on a Mac Classic and FileMaker to have cards, I always managed in an agile way. I used cards and stuck them on a board and moved them across a whiteboard. But we started doing that digitally. Moving on from there, one of the things that happened with that, though, during that time, we were doing this 3D visualization work, and I got a call from a producer that worked with Dick Wolf out of New York, and he wanted to do a series in Florida that pre-visualized stunt sequences in 3D. Now, this had not been done yet. This was the first time. Brooke Kennedy was the producer that had the idea, and she approached me through a recommendation from Electric Image, and I went down and we spent 4 months down on location in Miami Beach and South Beach, and that was a real turning point, because we were using and managing a show every 6 days. We were shooting an hour show, so it was very, very lots of moving parts, and again, the waterfall scheduling wouldn't work for that. So that eventually led me into creating a visual effects company through the 90s. And that's really what I did throughout the 90s until 99, when I moved to Shaw Island, retired from my visual effects company, and moved to Shaw Island in the San Juan Islands, and got involved with gaming. Actually, at that time, that's when the original Microsoft, the first Xbox, was being developed, because it released in 2001 November. I had a friend, an old high school friend that worked for Microsoft for years, and he asked me to be involved in helping them get content done for the games. So we did all the stadiums, for example, for NFL Fever. We were doing all the stadiums and feeding them in. I was out on a remote island, and on my staff was at Korea, in California, in Florida, and in Singapore. And we were all over the place, but we were able to pull that all together through a distributed team. So I've been familiar with that for quite some time. And that's how I got into the game industry, and then moved on to Electronic Arts, and then a gig with LucasArts as their operational director. We were doing Star Wars Force Unleashed. Then I skied for 10 years. And that's where I got involved using Favro, because prior to that, I used a product that you used to be involved with, Handsoft, and I got involved with that. And when you sold that off to Perforce, and I was working on creating a system to manage lift maintenance for a ski resort, to manage the maintenance of lifts. And that was a bottom-up thing, because that was I wasn't a manager in that situation. So all my life I've been managing kind of top down, managing teams. Now I was part of a team, and I had to kind of push up, from the bottom up. So it was a different experience. It was quite phenomenal. But, it's just being passionate about creation is really what's been driving me back to creative aspects.
So, I mean, the story you were telling me there about the island, it was kind of like, if we would have just have excluded, the year you mentioned, and just made a story about kind of your setup, how you were working, with people in different places, and so that might have been 2020 or 2021. No,
it's it's the new normal in COVID, right? Working remotely, and pulling your strengths from your team members wherever they may be located. It was difficult back then because we were in dial-up. We were sending files via the FedEx airplane, So it was,
wow,
that's
yeah. How going back to the thing, with leading creatives. I mean, very often when I get into this kind of conversation, because now more than 15 years, in various ways, helping with production in game development and also many other industries, but especially, I just like game development a lot, because it's that combination of, it's something truly creative that comes together with a lot of very interesting technical challenges, and it is at such a big scale that also all these organizational challenges come in. So it's a couple of hard things that comes together in like a perfect storm, which is why I keep coming back to that specific example. And I think also if we're looking at what's happening today, in Hollywood, in many ways, I think the world of films and TV is in many ways becoming more like the game industry rather than the other way around. I remember 10 years ago, it was kind of like, when you were in game development, you kind of looked up to the film industry. But, now the game industry is 3 times as big as the movie industry. And, the last 12 months, the movie industry has struggled, and game developers that managed to kind of figure out how to operate, in a remote way have been thriving. So it's, there's a bit of a convergence, I think, we're seeing there. And you mentioned, VFX, and, there's a few VFX clients of Favro. Actually, we had, a great webinar before, here this summer with Nico, who's at one of those companies, and I thought that was a good talk. So what I want to get into here is a little bit the whole, people might say that, well, hold on a second, creativity and process, it just doesn't go together. The title of this webinar, leading creatives, is is even like controversial in some areas. It's like, you can't lead creativity. Can you just get a little bit into that, because this is something which is truly hard and almost a bit of a mystery to many.
Absolutely, and it's something I've run into my entire career. But one, being an artist myself, and in some ways wanting to shun process, but then also seeing the importance of process, and that it's actually not. To me, it comes down to even a basic thing. There's a book called How to Fly a Horse by Kevin Ashton, and one of the things he says in there is about creativity. And he says, creativity, it's not so much, I think, and I tend to agree with him on this. It's a myth that it's just all of a sudden that the creative is just this magical kind of mysterious spark that happens. I mean, the creative process is really observation, evaluation, iteration. That's really what you're doing. It's not a sudden shift of perception, but it's you solve the problems that leads to creation, that leads to another problem that you want to solve. So to me, that's why process is so important. And even like in game development, particularly in game development, you've got, if you want to have that, autonomy, obviously, you want to have that collaboration and the coordination. And that's not just at the level of, it's at the level of the individual, at the level of the team, of the department, and then of the overall organization. You got those whole things stacked. The bigger the organization is, the more there those levels. But as you concentrate on that, that process of observation, evaluation, iteration, it doesn't stifle you at all. In fact, it empowers me.
Yeah.
And now I'm using Favro. I'm not building another company. I'm doing my own projects and working with, a film festival and a museum, doing things with them. But, I can get a lot done with very little labor, simply because I automate a lot of that process that I can plug. So there's a lot of things I don't have to think about.
Yeah.
That I can automate that are very helpful. So to me, process is not an inhibitor. It can be if it's a top down and you don't look at the actual what the people that are creating the end creator is actually doing, and how that feeds into everything.
Yeah. But I would like to get your comment on something, because when you talk about it, it's like with any great athlete, they make it look easy, right? And it's kind of like when you think about it, you make it sound easy, which is great. But if I just look at some very typical patterns, in creative industries, very often what happens is that when a company becomes too corporate, they start to centralize a lot of processes. They start to do these kind of very centralization oriented tools, etc. And the reason this happens might be that they're just going through an IPO, and they're a little bit like, okay, now we need to do those things. I actually find that companies that have been on listed for a long time are a little bit more chill about that, to be honest. So they kind of gone full circle. But anyways, what I want to get to here is there's a bit of a dynamic going on where a company grows for various reasons. It becomes more corporate, and the best creatives feel like, okay, this is suffocating me, and they quit, and then they join maybe a startup, and sometimes there can be the situation that the startup have raised some serious venture capital, but they just they're like no process. It's like sailing a boat where all the ropes are loose, and at some point they run out of money, and the people then go to yet another place. But then you have these new companies that kind of manage to strike that that balance, where it's like what Einstein said, things should be as simple as possible but not simpler. And I guess it's the same with process. You should have as little process as you can, but not less. And I guess it's also it needs to be like the right process. So what I would like to ask you is, like, do you agree with this kind of analysis, that this kind of dance tends to go on all the time? Is that a correct observation? And two, if so, what is it that these companies they kind of get it right? What is the core of what it is that they get right?
Well, I think when you look at this, particularly with it happens more often than not, I think, with that scenario you just described. And I think the really key, at least for me, I've done a lot of consulting as well with on process, primarily in the gaming industry as well. But it's the kind of common thread is where that organizational gravity that's good, that's helping that startup grow, or helping a company, for example, a large corporation that's already exists, that does mergers, that does acquisitions and mergers. That's what I was part of in a ski resort situation. So you have acquisitions and mergers, and where you need that kind of common thread that everybody's, or common sheet of music that everybody's playing from. The problem gets into is that a lot of times when that process is defined top down, like this is how we do it. That's I run into that all the time. Well, this is how we've always done it. Well, that's the problem right now. The one thing about the creative process, I'm constantly revising or tweaking that process. It can always be more efficient. So it's not a one and done kind of thing. It's never a one and done kind of thing. But I think a mistake a lot of big companies, when they get to that point where they got that momentum and they're larger, you get management defining a process that might not be the best process for their teams to work through. And they kind of impose it on the teams versus letting that, looking at what is the actual process between these the artists here building these assets and the game programmers that need these and all those dependencies. You really got to build that process from the ground up and not the top down. And many times we've course corrected. When I went to LucasArts, they were 2.5 years into Star Wars Force Unleashed, the first film there. And it was like, I went in as a director of operations and, lots of talent there, tremendous amount of talent, but the collaboration, just the process wasn't there to enable and empower everyone to make that thing happen. And we finally did. We got the right process in place. We got everything done, and we finished the game, and it did quite well. But again, it was that the main thing I looked at there was what are the processes we're using, and do they match with the actual work that needs to be done, and that the person sitting in a chair that's actually doing the model or doing the programming, does it work for them? And 9 times out of 10, it didn't. And companies weren't functioning.
So do you have, I think a very scary step for people that have a successful career in any kind of creative field, and they're looking at an opportunity to take more of a leadership role. I think many are feeling this is quite a scary step. Am I not going to be, am I going to the dark side now, to go back to Star Wars thing? And what would be your top advice, to someone who's just about to, put on that hat of, or maybe we should, get some of those stripes on your shoulder,
I would say, particularly when you're picking a tool, don't pick a tool that will dictate your process. In other words, that the years of waterfall scheduling, and particularly in game development, it doesn't really work. I mean, you can get a game done, but it's not very efficient. You're going to cut into your profit. But being able to really look at that, what's the right terminology I want to use for that? It's about picking your tool. Make sure that the tools that you use to define those processes don't force you into a process. That's the thing, and that's why it's so scary. It's very intimidating when you get this this big system. Let's say it's a system for project management. This is how you're going to manage this game. And you're making that jump and you're doing it, and it's like, make sure that system, whatever that is not something that's pushing you into a certain direction that you have to do. Unlike Favro lets me, the way I use Favro and the way I approach Favro is I look at, here's what I'm trying to solve for. Here's the creative problem, so to speak, that I'm going to observe, evaluate, and iterate on. Or my team is going to. What can I put in place? What processes can I put in place to kind of grease that sled for everybody?
It's kind of, a couple of things you said there. We could probably just take and use as taglines for Favro. You said don't let the tool dictate your process. I really like that one.
Absolutely.
It's kind of I saw a clip the other day about kind of summarizing what's known so far about Amazon's Lord of the Rings upcoming series, and it's going to be Second Age. It's kind of interesting. It's I'm obviously blowing my own trumpet here now, but it's a little bit like Atlassian is kind of like that Sauron who kind of keeps coming back, because with the previous company, Handsoft, the war was a little bit different than now. The war was kind of like game studios that had the money and they kind of had management in order. They were picking Handsoft, and the ones that were a bit they just didn't have the money. They were picking Jira. And it was very interesting for us because we won customers and we lost customers, and when we lost a customer and they went to Jira, we knew that we could bet, like, okay, 9 months from now, the company's bankrupt, because it was typically a sign that they were doing some heavy cost cutting because they were in financial trouble. And very often we were right. I think now, if this is, let's say, the third age, for
Right.
me, the battle is actually a little bit different, because Atlassian it's a very well run company. I have a massive amount of respect for them from say a company point of view. It's just that the products are very old fashioned. And very much kind of the best out of the previous age. So now the battle is actually very different. Now it's more around kind of corporate, versus collaborative. So for companies that they want to be more corporate, they want to centralize processes. That's where they're going. They will buy into the whole Atlassian. They will drink the Atlassian Kool-Aid, so to say. Versus we see so many. It's kind of like, when you have some great talent, they spin out of a bigger company, they get some venture capital because they have an amazing idea, they have amazing resumes, and then they pick Favro. So it's almost like new versus old, and collaborative, versus corporate. So it's a little bit of a different battleground, to be honest. And I guess this is a webinar in itself, talking more about kind of market dynamics and things like that. So anyways. Small interlude there, obviously shamelessly blowing my own trumpet. There might be other views on the market, but that are some data points on what's happening. You kind of mentioned your use of Favro yourself, and so I'm a big movie buff, so I was very excited when I heard that you're organizing a film festival. But then I was like, this was 2020, last year, and I was like, but you can't organize a film festival. So can you just tell the story? What happened there?
Yeah, so when I moved to the San Juan Islands, again for the second time, first time in '99, second time again in 2019, early 2019, I went to that time I moved to a little smaller island called Orcas from the main island, Friday Harbor, over in San Juan Island. I went over to San Juan because they had a film festival, and I went over just to volunteer for it because it's a documentary film festival, and I'm very much focused on documentaries around environmental and social justice and things like that.
The question is this: okay, so what advice do you have when you're bringing a new team that develops a different product, but the product needs work in line and the complement of the existing product? Okay, I see what you. Okay, is it best to force them into the existing process, or to find a new process, or leave each on its own? Okay, there's a book about this. It's called The Innovators Dilemma. Have you read it, Mark?
I have not, actually.
Oh, you should read it.
I will. I'm always looking for a good book to take out one of my cards.
That describing, this particular problem. But I mean, what's your experience? Okay, so you're doing something entirely new, within something old.
Okay.
Should you, try to do the new within the framework of the way you're working with the old? That might be quite mature, but maybe also potentially a little bit too tight. Or do you think that you should simply just leave them by themselves, or should you proactively create a new process for this kind of new endeavor?
Actually, I would look at it as a combination. I would never just reuse an old process, because that's when you're going to start getting into that situation where your corporate gravity works against you instead of for you.
Yeah.
If you're just saying, okay, hey, this process worked on this product. Now here's a completely different product. There's going to be a unique process for that product. It doesn't mean scrapping the old thing completely. It might, but it also might just mean taking that new product and looking at your old and then just iterating that process. Again, observation, evaluation, iteration. So you look at that and say, how do I tweak this to make it for this unique product? But I definitely wouldn't just jump in and say, this is how we always do it. That's where you get
yeah. So do I interpret you right when you say that, that alternative, which is kind of like, okay, so don't use the old one, don't use the old process, don't just let it float, or drift, maybe is the right term in English. Yeah. And actually go for that third option, which is proactively try to think, what is the best process for this particular situation.
Absolutely. The third option is really how basically I've approached projects.
Yeah.
Throughout my whole entire career, it's still do to this day, because each one is going to be unique. I mean, we're problem solving, so it's not the same solution to every problem.
The
creative process is problem solving. There's a unique process for that particular unique problem. And it might be based 90% on the old process. But it might not. You have to be willing to look at it.
I mean, again, I could just cut out that section and use that's like a pitch for Favro, because the problem when you use, say, let's say that you're standardized on a traditional enterprise tool, and you're just trying to do something new, and it's going to be like, no, you have to follow this particular process, and it's going to be very hard to change. In Favro, all of these things kind of coexist. Oh, by the way, I have two questions for you now. So I want to ask you about the film festival, but just before that, when John and I did a lot of these webinars in the summer, we actually got several times a question. I think it was from audience in America, saying like, is it pronounced Favro or Favro? We quite often say Favro, and I also like Favro, which is what often Americans say, because it's like your favorite tool. Sounds kind of good. I think that a bit of the confusion is that if you look at how it's pronounced versus spelled, if you say Favro, it sounds like like John Favreau. Obviously, now it's with Mandalorian has got into like huge fame, but he spells it a little bit different, and I can't swear on this, but I think his family name is originally Italian, and I think the European way you pronounce it would actually be more like kind of Favreau. But I'm not gonna swear on that. But anyways, but I have this memory that didn't you work with him at some point in your career, or did I get that wrong?
Well, when I was at LucasArts. Mm-hmm. So in addition, one of the things you talk about process, I think this is important because it makes a point of, you talk about new process, old process. One of the main things, shifts that took place that we did in Star Wars Force Unleashed was actually do some sharing collaboration with Industrial Light and Magic, because ILM, here that they were downstairs. We were on this floor at the Presidio. Yeah. They're on that floor, and there was really no asset sharing going on. They had all these Star Wars assets, but they're very heavy because they're for rendering, right? But there was ways, and the tech directors actually we kind of pushed it in a direction where they started then taking models, and it was much more efficient to take a really heavy model and reduce it. Then it's according to canon, it's right, it's proper, it's going to pass George's inspection. And during that process, while we were doing that, they started making Clone Wars, and that was being done mainly in Singapore, all the animation, but that 3D product. So in that, he was involved with that project as well. So peripherally, peripherally.
And what I'm a huge fan of the Mandalorian, but I have to say that I was almost equally fascinated by the documentary that they produced. I think it was called Disney Gallery or something. Disney Gallery, where they basically made kind of like interviews, how it was made, and I was fascinated by how progressive he seems to be in pushing for that next level of technology being used. With, I think they call it, it's not the void. Actually, I think we actually have people in the audience that probably knows this very well. But
there you go.
What they do, they create this. They basically use Unreal to make sure that the background, they actually film stuff in real time. It's pretty amazing. It's like the making the TV series almost like more similar to like a real-time rendered game, than traditional, movie production. It's like,
absolutely. And quite a bit of that tech, even that was used in Star Wars Force Unleashed too, to a degree, where it was really wonderful. We go on a soundstage with a camera and be in the scene.
Yeah.
basically. So you could walk through and you knew where the action was happening. So a lot of role playing and things went through to, you know, just on some of the challenges and things, levels. But yeah, no, it's a virtual, that whole virtual production methodology. Yeah.
So yeah, you know, there seems, you know, that whole, you know, the marriage of technology and process and creative. He just seems to be one of the people that truly gets that, and
absolutely
seeing this as something that holds you back, but sees the opportunity in how can this make us move forward, you know. And I mean, you can just look at the result. Mandalorian is awesome. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's true across the board with technology, right? I mean, to me, again, technology, the creative process, you know, the technology just brings infinite possibility. I mean, how can I apply this?
Yeah.
You know, how can I take this? You know, it's back in, you know, I'll go back real quick, back to the old days when we were first in my first visual effects company, Light Point Entertainment. What we were doing there, we were experimenting with a lot of things, motion capture, and, you know, that's when it was all wired. Flock of birds is what it was called.
Yeah.
And we also had this, and it was, we affectionately call it the flock of turds, but because it was not, it was very difficult to wrangle. But, you know, we also were dealing with some virtual set technology that was just coming out of the gate from Evans and Sutherland. And we had a strategic deal with them. We were doing some virtual set stuff, but that same technology, actually, that wound up being that ENS technology wound up being, you know, if you watch American football, you know, everyone's used to now, there's that yellow line where the first down is, right? Well, that's that was kind of, that came out of that virtual set technology. Yeah. So you have the application of it. Now you see it all over the place in sports.
Yeah.
You know, so, but it opened up a whole bunch of now you're from a creative perspective. You know, what can I do here to make this game more visceral for the people that are watching?
This film festival, you know, we were just about to start talking about that when we kind of had our cutoff there. So can you you know, kind of briefly just mention, so how did you get the film festival, you know, to work in a COVID situation, and you know, I know you got some you know, you can probably actually show some things too, because I've seen on social media you've been pretty open with sharing, you know, schedules, you know, around this film festival, and I noticed that, but this is in Favro, you know. So I guess, you know, you're not keeping it, you know, secret. So, you know, maybe you can also show some cool stuff if it's possible.
Absolutely, I will show you something, and I'll tell you. So what happened there? So I did when my internet went out. I think I had said we did a brick and mortar festival in 2019. Right? We did it there in Friday Harbor. It was wonderful, a 3-day event. They've been doing it that was the eighth year. Then we get COVID. Right. Yeah. We get it this year and we're like, are we going to have a festival or are we not? You know, because it was kind of sketchy at first. We didn't know in March, then April, then May. Things just kept getting worse. We're like, all right, virtual. Let's try virtual. You know, we looked around a lot at different platforms that we could use. But the main thing then became, you know, there's a lot of coordination, a lot of planning, strategic planning. And so basically I built those processes that we used in brick and mortar in Favro so that we could do it virtually. And let me pull up, I'll go ahead and share a screen here.
Awesome.
So this is let's do that one, share. This is my Friday Harbor Film Festival collection. Basically, you know, in Favro, you have all your collections down the side. These are all different projects I'm working on. But, you know, and even the way I've laid this out, this is unique to this particular project because you have, you know, basically you work your way up to these boards. But this is our, you know, for example, from things like, you know, social media. This is where I plan all our social media posts. Keep track of it. You can see, you know, you could change the status. Here's ones that are in Hootsuite. These are actually posted. I haven't gone today, but I'll go and fix these. But that's all here. You can dig deeper if you want. So we do that. Then from a programming scheduling to look at scheduling. This is what's beautiful about Favro. So these are all just cards. So here's my movie, right? Beyond the Fear of Singing. This is one that's streaming now. But you know, it comes from when we're actually going through film discovery as a cameraman process, right? With all sorts of, you know, automations in place. So
awesome. That was, wow, you're so fast. We just released that a week ago.
Yes. You know, well, that's that used to be workflow, right? And so I had all sorts of workflow, and I love that feature because to be able to quickly visually get an idea. And even I started to talk about saving time. These things, I can quickly look. I know these green, these are streaming. Those are paid streaming. These are free streaming. Right? They're already done. They're gray. These are upcoming. I don't have those films in yet. They're red. So I don't change the colors. I just move the status. When this thing goes from, if I'm in the director's series, I'm doing the asset wrangling, I go to ready to screen, it's changed to yellow, So now I know that this thing's ready to go.
This is beautiful. This is so great. It's so awesome. When as a software developer, when you made something, you had all these great ideas and how this is going to be used, and then seeing someone like 1 week later putting it into like brilliant action is great.
Well, it's the beautiful thing about that. So I've just updated this card here, right? It updates. It's the same card. It's the same card. Look, now it's yellow. So those little efficiency things right there, those are things I don't have to think about. I don't go to bed at night thinking, I got to remember to do that on that film because what stage is it in? No, I know what stage it is. It's right
but
here.
also, if you
left to right.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, if you think about, what typically happens in the creative industry, film or games or anything, very often, this would be manual work. You would have someone would be like, product administrator or like product, or like a, there's many titles for this, but anyways, it would actually be a human sitting just like manually doing these kind of things.
Yes.
So
I used to do that in FileMaker or in Excel. I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. So
the board, I'm on the board. We have a small board for the film festival. They're all in Friday Harbor. I'm here. I'm doing all the technical aspect. I work with the director. The director, board of directors. Karen. She does all the film acquisition, and then we just coordinate right here. So we know what status, where are we, okay, we're getting ready. This is our next one. Truffle Hunters we're going to do in the spring, but it's the licensing is secure, but it's not till later. So it hasn't started to asset wrangling, event film listing, etc.
And this is done from an island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So literally we can all move to an island in the Maldives and just do shit from there.
When I saw you in the mountain, I was very tempted when I saw you 3 weeks there, I think. I was like, oh, man, if they have good internet, you can do it, No, you can really do it without even this, but you really want good internet.
It's not great there, but it's good enough for, Favro is not very sensitive to, latency and you actually don't need a very powerful connection. So it was all good. And I'm very enthusiastic about what's happening now with Starlink because the SpaceX and Starlink, because it means that we will be able to truly, do remote work from really everywhere in the world. It's going to be, absolutely. I think it's going to change a lot of things, a lot of things that are a bit of a pipe dream today. And it's like so close, but it's going to be reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mark, so much thanks for being, here. This is a great conversation. I hope we can have, maybe a bit of a follow-up conversation, maybe in a few weeks on, Clubhouse or, something like that.
Absolutely.
We could talk forever. And I think that there's so many things we talked about that could be like a breakout session in itself. Just this part here now around, film festival, we could do something just around that, because I think a lot of people will be quite interested, because you're a man of action, it's like, what you have done now and adapted very quickly to the changed, circumstances with not that many people are things that people have been struggling with, and you're a one person army, which is really cool.
Well, you know what, like I said, with this tool, the collaboration is simple, and the important thing, the really important thing for me is it's 100% reflects the most efficient process, not the other. I don't have to alter my process for this tool.
Yeah,
this tool molds I'm constantly, like I said, I'll fine tune something. Oh, if I automated this, boom, and I could do it real quick. Bam, automate. Don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. Awesome.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I certainly did. If you want to elevate yourself as a modern leader and help your teams become even more successful, then check out Favro Academy at favro.com. There you will find podcasts, webinars, articles, all free of charge. Check it out.